of esteemed GCs from tech companies and highly seasoned cyber specialist. Anubhav. Yeah, it's good. Anubhav is the general counsel for Microland and has more than 25 years of experience. I have Jyoti, who's the deputy GC for Infosys. She also has more than 25 years of hardcore legal experience. Amber Gupta, he's the GC for Birla Sun Life Insurance, and he's got more than 20 years of experience. I have David Nordell, who is the cyber specialist and a securities law specialist also, with more than 40 years, with 40 years of experience. So just to set the context right, if data is the new oil, technology is the machinery that refines it. Tech today is a market full of wonderful opportunities, and the industry is motivated to generate exciting new products every day. We are seeing transformative technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, automation, which are being applied across industries. Just to share some mind-boggling numbers on the impact of technology in our daily life, we have almost 2 billion websites which are operating today. We have almost more than 4 billion cell phone users worldwide. Google handles almost 5 billion searches in a day. Almost 400 hours of video content is being uploaded on YouTube every minute. So such is the impact of digital revolution in our daily lives. Having set this context, I would set the floor open with my panelists. So my first question is, how is the technology influencing law and the lawyers in your specific legal domain? And I would request Anubhav to share his views on this.
How where is technology more effective, and where kind of it still lawyers have to do what they have to do, right? So probably in an in-house role, I would divide the function into or our job into three parts. One is intellectualize, second is analyze, and last is the process or transaction. So if I could do that, I think technology is very effective in the last two. But at the end, you need to know the law, analyze it, and apply it. That is what we specialize at. But in terms of, if you see the volume of work in each category, as in-house counsels, the bottom two take up almost 90% of the time, right? And there's the 10% there. So I think technology is where you should leverage in terms of to maximize your efficiencies depending on your needs. That's what is the take on technology for me.
Sure. Jyoti would like to add to this?
Yeah, I think every corporate today adopts technology in some form or the other, right? It could be digitization, it could be automation, it could be analytics. You could be at any stage, or you could be a combination of all three. If I have to take Infosys as an example, we were traditionally a service provider, right? We were known for services that we provided. We are today into products. If you look at some of our strategies, or the few pillars of our strategies, the first one really is to be able to make sure that we energize the core, which is effectively you take what the customer already has and then put new technology over and above that. The second is building an agile and digital future for our clients, right? And for doing all of this, what you really need is reskilling. it's very, very important to be able to reskill our existing employees to be able to add that value to customers. If I have to share some law firm examples, and I think that's also important. It's just not here, but it's also in law firms. Say, for example, Gilbert and Tobin today has an equity in a web-based platform. If you look at DLA Piper, they have then gone ahead and partnered with Lawyers on Demand in Australia, and they're providing online services. So there is, technology happening everywhere. I don't know if you want me to cover the impact now or you want me to cover it later, but I'm happy to do it.
No, I think that should be fine. David, your views on this particular aspect?
Okay, first of all, I'm not a lawyer. And my experience in the world of security and cybersecurity, information technology, includes quite a lot of doing things that are not legal. So I see things in a slightly different way from personal experience and from seeing what other people do. Technology is definitely a huge influence on the world of business, including the business of law. All of this is great. It enables you to do things faster, better, bigger, and in principle, more accurately, most of the time. The problem is that we don't necessarily, I should say, the people who use the technology don't necessarily understand that it's very easy to subvert technology against the interests of the users. Data is stolen, data can be modified, can be fabricated, can be destroyed entirely with very little effort. And it happens all the time. And it's extremely important for the users of technology, information technology, and also things that are not really information technology, what we call Internet of Things, that they should understand the risks involved, that they should understand that things can be done against their interests. I'm not saying that this happens to all of you all the time. Of course it doesn't. But it happens enough, the exceptions are important enough, that you have to take account of them. And this applies in business. It applies also in criminal investigation. Crimes are carried out using computer systems. Crimes can be concealed using computer systems. And frankly, these things are going to get bigger and, well, quote-unquote better, in other words, worse, as time goes on, as society becomes more and more dependent on information technology. So we have to be suitably, I would tend to say even cynical about the use of technology. We've got to understand its limitations, we've got to understand what can be done against us, and we've got to be prepared. Yes, this gives lots of opportunities, lots of business for nasty people like me, to be quite honest. But this is part of the cost of doing business, in exactly the same way as having lots of lawyers, whether in-house or out of the house, is part of the cost of doing business in the modern world. So bear in mind that this is not a straightforward world in which everything just appears, it just happens the way that we want it to. It doesn't, and part of the cost is understanding the risks in technology, just as in a law, just as in the non-application of contracts or whatever it might be.
Interesting thoughts. So we have some views looking at the positive aspects of technology, and then also sort of understanding the nuances and the negative impacts of technology if we do not implement it properly. My next question is, how can efficient use of technology change the face of the legal department? If you could share any measures, specific best practices, any applications which have been used in your department. Jyoti, if you could share, start on this.
So I think in Infosys, this is on, yeah. Sorry. So in Infosys, we digitized practically everything in the legal department sometime last year. And I'm going to just talk about contracts because we're talking about massive contracts over here. And it's not just, contracts, we are across 56 countries, so we have, 2,000, 3,000 plus customers. So there are multiple contracts that we do, and we do SOWs. To one contract will have about 50 SOWs, right? And there are some organizations, I just met a couple of people from other IT companies who even have the legal departments look at change requests. So it's a massive, massive database. And what we have done is, of course, we've digitized our entire contract lifecycle management process. So right from, there is no contract that is happening via email anymore or manually anymore. It's all on a system. So our sales guys, finance guys, risk team, whoever it is all working on that one piece of contract. Our contracts get a score now, so every clause which is high-risk clause, like an unlimited liability or step-in rights, or anything which we've defined as high-risk gets a score. And the high-risk and scored contracts are then, there's more focus on that. The obligation tracking is being done immediately before immediately after execution of the contract. And more importantly is that the approval matrix is also in place. So like every clause, like an unlimited, probably some clauses go up to the board, some go up to a deal review committee, some go up within. And it's all happening there on the system. While a young junior lawyer is sitting down, there's a playbook that pops up. And if you're doing a particular clause, you'll actually be able to see what that clause, jurisdiction-wise, what is the take of that clause in, say, US or in Australia. So it's all been possible because of technology. But there are limitations, like David explained, that, you have to know when to use, how to use, and you have to be very, very, aware of the fact that there are huge limitations. And you have to keep working towards taking it to the next level. For example, now, after having digitized everything, we're now looking at how we can automate this entire process. So even the coding of an agreement or even execution, we didn't have legacy contracts. They were all over the place, all over the world. Today we have a repository. But this can happen again, unless and until the sales guy sitting at the system at the end, after he signs, he's able to upload that into the particular system we're talking about. So there is a certain amount of automation still required, and that's where we are headed.
I'd like to comment very briefly on this. All of this is great, and I accept it. The problem is that you're talking from the point of view of a very, very large company with a global spread, global scale. The reality is that most business is carried out by SMEs. SMEs don't necessarily have the resources to do all of this effectively. They don't necessarily have the know-how. And actually, they also don't necessarily have the resources and know-how to secure everything properly. So don't assume that everything that's done by a powerhouse like Infosys also applies to the rest of the world. Also, to be quite honest, I think that India has been extremely effective in using technology well, fast, and scaling up. Not everywhere is like India. And the global picture is very different from what we're discussing here.
I kind of have a mixed view on that, because I have seen even individual lawyers and small firms use technology very, very effectively. I was in a litigation situation, and this lawyer in Gurgaon kind of is a two-man army guy. He's in the evening having a meeting with me, and then at the same time he's using his computer and dictaphone to almost dictate a affidavit or a whole plaint on the computer, and his application reads his voice and types the whole thing. And by the end, my meeting is over, he has a printed plaint which is to be filed next day. And all he needs is an office boy to do that, right? So I have seen technology being applied very, very efficiently in terms of, and then converting it into, say, for example, meeting notes, right? You're taking notes, and then if you are very comfortable with technology, you can just convert it, send it wherever you want, have actionables done in fraction of a time. So it is efficient for individual lawyers as well, right? So I beg to differ there, but in terms of large corporates, the whole problem statement is different, because not only we are dealing with multiple or the number of contracts are different in large numbers, but also the kind of jurisdictions that are dealing, the nature of laws are different, and the complexity of the entire process is different. So if we do not apply technology, and I don't have any one area which is not digitized, right? Whether, as Jyoti said, it is contracting, we are exploring contract lifecycle management, which goes end to end, right from requesting a contract to the closing of a contract, including obligation management. We are exploring artificial intelligence, not only to kind of abstract the contract. Say, for example, you have an RFP which needs to be responded in 2 days. Even the most efficient lawyer will take 2 to 3 days to digest a document, right? What about applying AI, which can abstract the document, give you the key clauses that you have to look at? And there are tools now intelligent enough. Yes, the accuracy is improving as we speak here. The natural languages, the OCR abilities and the technology that is coming is improving. Machines are learning to do the algorithms which are more sophisticated. But that makes the life of lawyers far easier, far accurate, and also improves the response time. Look at compliance, right? If you have to do, say, 56 countries or even 15 countries to comply, I don't think any lawyer has the ability to learn and understand the entire complex compliance ecosystem of those countries. But if you have the right tool and you have your compliances mapped out in not only in and also mapped onto the right stakeholders, at least you are able to control or manage the risk that is there. Come to auditing, right? The whole auditing world is all technology right now, right? The whole entire obligation management, the risk management, post-contractual SOW management, it would have been, it is mere, this is all possible, I think, without technology. It's difficult for me personally to imagine something like 2,000 contracts, on top of it 50 SOWs, on top of every contract, and then you manage obligations on top of that manually. It would be huge team that would be required to do that kind of stuff. And there will be no audit trials if we do it manually, except we have to maintain registers. Look at then the whole litigation. The reputation management. The courts are now increasingly adopting technology not only to serve notices, but to publish their lists and listings. Imagine when I started my career, I used to spend hours together waiting outside the court just for where the hearing used to be, right? And then guess when the order used to come, right? Then the clerk I had to give and go after that clerk, please give me that order. And now it's there on the website. In the comfort of my office, I can access it. It's become easy, right? Yes, technology cannot substitute the hearing that is actually taking place. We can do that remotely, but collaboration is something that is possible by technology, but the whole legal systems have to kind of gear up to that expectation, which is a process of adoption, which is happening slowly. And the new trial, right now, I think the companies have to manage the social media itself. I think the whole reputation management and trial by media is an important aspect of it. Look at some of the cases which employees had. They didn't go and file in the court. They raised social petitions on social media to fight their legal causes, right? And that really then so the companies have to kind of adopt technology and learn how to handle it pretty quickly. And lastly, I think in terms of the governance, the boardrooms, I remember taking this large packets to the boards, and managing board meetings was like doing page number reconciliations, and if one item got disconnected, then the whole bundle had to be printed again. Now I walk into my boardroom on an iPad and everything else, and I can do presentations which includes movies and multimedia and show data in a much more integrated and faster way, which has improved not only board decision making, but also the efficiency at which we manage the board meetings, right? So I think technology is helping us in every field that general counsels or legal profession is about. It's a matter of adoption and how smartly we adopt the technology.
Wonderful thoughts, Anubhav, on this. Amber, coming to you, you spend a great deal of time in the insurance business. So if you could share some thoughts that how has technology sort of changed the insurance business and how you're applying technology as such to deal with the legal risk in the insurance business, particularly impact of frauds, litigation management, and contract management, large volume contracts, and board governance as such.
Thank you. Insurance has been, coming up fast with the technology adoption, if you ask me. Of course, banking always been the leaders. You can remember the Information Technology Act when it was first introduced, and the one stroke it also amended the Indian Evidence Act, the Bankers Book Evidence Act, and giving a lot of legal validity to various banking transaction and online transaction, and all where it's all started. And of course, then securities market picked up very well. Especially the National Stock Exchange when it came, and they connected the whole India through its terminal systems, and that's the traditional way of the securities market started changing. You don't have to come over the floor. Everything you can place your orders from your respective terminals. And of course, the Depository Act in 1996 when it came, which made the demat of the shares compulsory. And that's how the law and technology work have started together to what I can say, at least in India, which of course has been adopted in universally what is happening. And now insurance is now also taking up very fast in that scenario. It's being a slow adoption in insurance, but it's taking fast. Of course, securities market and banking are much ahead. Now insurance is taking up. And what are the good thing which is happening is that now regulators, the insurance regulators are taking very serious note on the use of technology in the insurance. Now we have a regulatory framework to permit enable a lot of insurance contract through various regulations which can you purchase online, electronic issuance of policies, web aggregators, regulations which allow you to source policies through web aggregators, and of course a similar concept like a demat of shares. We have a demat of insurance policies which has also been permitted, which is known as e-insurance repository accounts, which is similar to like opening of a demat account for shares. So a lot of technology adoption is happening. It's a slow one, but it's happening. IRDA has been notifying a lot of new regulatory framework regulations which the companies can adopt. But what has happened on the back end, if you look at it, the Paytm of the world, the Amazon of the world have started entering in the insurance. And there's a new set of, traditionally if you see the insurance market has been dominated by LIC. It still holds 70% of the market share, and they're 90% of, almost 95 to 100% of their market is through insurance agents. So it is an insurance agent who get the policies. But you have suddenly a new animal coming in the Amazon of the world and the Paytms of the world, who comes with a different mindset at all, who wants to sell the insurance in a different manner. And that has caused a lot of pressure in the insurance industry to start adopting technology in terms of business. And of course, providing a legal backup, legal solutions, legal legislation to enable companies to pick it up well. The Paytm has started as, for example, I'm just taking an example of Paytm. Paytm started with as a corporate agent, and now they have registered themselves as a life insurance company and general insurance. So imagine somebody who is backed up with a foreign venture capital, and and they have so much money to dispose of, what they can do. I mean, then technology will transfer only on the mobile. You can buy everything, and they are already doing it. They're selling insurance, group insurance. A lot of people are buying it, easy to buy. So it's kind of an insurance being forced, but it's happening very fast. And recently, regulators are also adopting some of the measures which are there externally. For in UK, for example, UK has been very, very prominent in adopting sandbox kind of technology, which now IRDA and insurance company has also been adopting. And sandbox is basically a kind of tool, is a temporary facility where the regulators allow technology companies to experiment certain tools, manners in which you can sell financial products which are low cost, and the overall objective is to reach out to the customer at the very, very easy manner. And it's a temporary relief given from various regulation. You need not comply with various regulation, and even if there's a breach, no regulatory penalties are there. So it's an experimental model which is being given. So IRD has constituted a committee on sandbox regulation, and a report might be coming shortly. So regulators are also looking very, very forward-looking in taking insurance as a sector in the BFSI segment, along with banks and securities market, to come up well and look at various kinds of products and solutions which will help the customers to reach out the customers in a much faster manner, and at the same time providing a regulatory framework, because without regulatory framework, I don't think any business can take off, and this look very, very positive. Of course, globally, if you look at it, the biggest mover which I look at in the technology and insurance going together is, of course, on the insurance claims, because that's where a big piece of insurance lies. So there are solutions which are available, for example, blockchain technology, where some of the companies are using for early settlement of claims. Recently, there was news where some of the insurance companies in Singapore and Australia have adopted this technology. So imagine if there is a natural disaster and there's a flood, and now you have to settle claim for so many people. I mean, there's no records available. But if you have a blockchain technology which are based on a hyperledger and closed network kind of nodes, it will be easy for you to settle those claims. So that's another area which is looking at some of the companies and countries are already adopting. Another is on the wearable devices. Now, in India, it's still taking, and only very few companies has got into that. But if you look at the wearable devices, so they will give you a device, or you have to just place the device and wear it for one day or 24 hours. And the device itself will kind of tell you about your health conditions. It will monitor your overall lifestyle, how the heartbeat, how the blood pressure, how you're medically fit or not, Based on that, they will do an underwriting. So it's become very easy to buy an insurance cover for medical within 24 hours. Of course, that also poses other regulatory issues in terms of data privacy and data protection and all those, which I'm not touching. I mean, because it's a completely a different and much of vast topic. But these are the ways which are insurance is catching up. Some of the companies are now using smart contracts, code-based, as Jyoti just mentioned, code-based contracts where you can settle the claims. One of the insurance company has also done in India. Of course, in Singapore, they have doing it quite a lot. In India, also one of the insurance company has looked into where if there's a delay in the flight, so automatically your claim will be settled through the smart contract process. Of course, it's not cryptocurrency based; it's more will use through INR based because cryptocurrencies are not permitted in India. There's a legal challenge to that. And so, I mean, so many things are so many changes which is happening, and this is helping in the insurance industry in a big manner. The biggest thing is the regulators are now looking at it. They are allowing insurance company to experiment. There are provisions. They are encouraging them to adopt. In fact, talking about our own company now, 75 to 80% sales only happens through on a mobile-based technology, which is an e-app. So the agent will come to you, and through e-app only you will be able in a position to capture all the details. The entire KYC will be completed. And we were really looking forward to this Aadhaar-based authentication. Now ordinance has come up, so the entire KYC issue will also get resolved. So on a mobile phone itself, we can buy a policy just sitting in half an hour or 1 hour. So that's all the reach of the technology is. And we know that insurance is at present is highly underpenetrated in India. Hardly 4% to 5% insurance population is covered. So of course, with these technology advancements coming up, and the regulators also supporting with the legal framework which is coming up, a lot of quite an exciting sector to be looked into. On the in-house side, I fully agree, and in those of you, Jyoti and Anubhav mentioned, and most of the insurance companies are also, like we have adopted some of those technologies. We have an online management contract, SLA monitoring, and in fact, we have recently developed a app which is for litigation management. So we have almost 1,500 litigation. It's very difficult to track through, through Excel or, even for even technology, even online. So we have just recently created an app, in-house developed app, which I can access all my 1,500 litigation on my app. I can view my case. I give my approvals, whether to comply, go for appeal. I can communicate with my lawyers. Lawyers are also using it. Immediately after the court, they can update their, status, what's happening in the court. They can upload the copy of the order, whatever they are procuring. Similarly, like e-courts, like works. So it's an in-house e-court system which we have developed. So we are adopting technology a big way, and I'm sure as we move forward, insurance will also get a fast like banking and securities market.
Thank you, Amber, for the valuable thoughts, particularly impacting the insurance industry. So here we are talking about, extensive use of technology, but there is a downside to it. So it's going to impact the headcount, the budget, the legal budgets. So what is your view on that? Jyoti, if you could share your views on that.
Yeah, see, so gone are the days when contracts were about, also IT contracts were about hardware, software, procurement, AMC. I think we have moved from all of that now to larger and more complex things. So while it sounds really nice to talk about IoT and artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotics, etc., for lawyers, it's very, very important to understand what each of these technologies really mean. Because if you have not got a good understanding of the business, you don't have an understanding of the technology, how are you going to do these cloud computing contracts or any of these AI contracts? Okay. So it's very, very important, like I started this whole session with saying, that reskilling yourself is important. Even Stanford has come out with a course which is, I'm forgetting what the name is, but I have it written here somewhere. It's the College for Legal Informatics, right? So it's a lot of self-learning. It's a lot of classroom sessions. We have to make the time there to go out and understand. Because how is it going to impact the contract, right? We are looking at liabilities. We're looking at huge unlimited liabilities. With GDPR now, and some of you probably attended some of these data privacy sections, which are being held today. But with GDPR, the compliance, non-compliance penalties are so high that can you really afford to have data breaches? Can you really afford to have liabilities which are unlimited, or should you be focusing on caps and super caps? It's a unique situation. I'm also a cloud provider. I'm also a cloud supplier, but I'm also taking cloud services. So for example, I have, say, a deal with an Apple. Apple is taking cloud services from me. I'm taking cloud services from Azure. So whatever I'm giving here, I'm also going to expect to get here. So unless and until I have a good understanding of reps, warranties, liabilities, I'm not going to be able to really deliver on any of these contracts. So there's huge risk to technology because it's a gray area. The second thing to remember is the regulator is not ready with any regulation over here. Very, very little of it. So we don't really have a fallback where, like in a contract, you can have fallback positions. Here, there's no such thing and no guidance coming. So that's the other downside that I see here when it comes to impact.
I very much agree with this, and I think that part of the problem is that new technology is being adopted a little bit too fast, because the consumers of technology, whether we're talking about huge global companies or smaller ones, including the two-man law office, they're affected by essentially the hype cycle. They're affected by the glorious abilities of new technology to do whatever it might be, according to the publicity material. But it doesn't necessarily work exactly the way it's supposed to, or it may be not quite as robust as it's supposed to be. We've heard an enormous amount over the last couple of years about blockchain, which is supposed to be so secure and so wonderful and so fast and so this, that, and the other. The reality is that blockchain has never really been tested thoroughly, including by the global investment banks that have put tons of money into it. And it's only recently, but not in any way a surprise to me, that it's been published that it's possible to break the security of blockchain. And I've been saying this certainly for the last couple of years, because although I'm not a cryptographer, I know enough about the subject, and it was obvious that there are certain things, that in certain conditions you can break the cryptography of blockchain and basically falsify data. Well, what's going to happen to all of the companies that have invested large sums of money and large parts of their business process in implementing blockchain to do whatever, and then they suddenly discover that it's not quite as good, not quite as robust, and not quite as accurate as they were told by the suppliers, and they've been telling their customers. I think that because, we've just very recently seen 2 fatal plane crashes take place with the same kind of aircraft. And fortunately, it's only a few hundred people who are killed. I'm sorry to put it as bluntly as that. It's not quite as bad as 9/11, where we have thousands of people killed, but it's bad enough. Fortunately, the regulators of the aviation sector said, no, you cannot fly this until we've actually checked it out. But this is in an industry that has very, very high security or safety requirements, and nevertheless, things went wrong, fatally. The whole world of technology depends not just on accepting the promise of the manufacturer, the supplier, the developer, to say this is going to improve your performance tremendously, it's going to cut your costs, and so on and so forth. There are implicit and explicit warranties that need to be in place, and they need to be based on thorough testing, and they need to be based on, in many cases, more serious, what we call security by design. And in lots of areas, including, for example, the maritime industry, in which I'm quite heavily involved, security by design is lousy. Security by design is definitely good in aviation, but that's because the regulators understood that it's necessary, if only for the sake of making sure that the public's confidence is high. Security by design in lots and lots of other areas, including, by the way, road design is not very good. When it comes to motor vehicles, great, but that's also because it's a well-known industry. We have to adopt a more robust approach to the security and safety of the technology that we're adopting in many, many areas. Also in order to understand where sometimes even the contract terms are not quite so straightforward. There's a very recent case in which Zurich Insurance basically said, no, we're not going to pay up on the claim because this claim is basically covered by an active war clause. And this is something that's going to become more and more important in the case of cyber attacks. Why? Because a cyber attack may or may not be the result of action by a state party or proxy for a state party. Do we necessarily know? No. Most of the cyber attacks that have taken place in the world, we don't actually know who's responsible. We don't actually know why they were doing this. So we can make all sorts of assumptions. Yes, maybe it was Russia that was attacking Ukraine, or Iran attacking Saudi Arabia, whatever. A lot of these things are certainly unknown. I don't want to say unknowable, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to understand, the limits of the terms and conditions around our use of technology and how it gets financed, how it gets insured, and so on and so forth. And we are, look, I love technology. I've been using computers for many, many years. I'm basically a technology enthusiast. Nevertheless, we put too much trust in the stuff that we're sold or the stuff that sometimes we develop ourselves. We've got to be a bit more careful.
Just to add on the blockchain bit of it, I think, the blocks in the chain are all over the world. It's decentralized. And how do you then invoke anything that goes wrong, and which jurisdiction will apply, what laws will apply?
Right.
It's a huge challenge.
Absolutely true.
To add, the fundamentals of the law will always remain the same. And so the technology should be seen as an enabler in either in terms of claim arises or in ease of doing business or in terms of, faster execution of contracts. For example, digital signatures now, So you can use your digital signature in signing a contract, so much easy for you rather than taking traditional way of taking printout, signing and all those things, So
DocuSign, which is even simpler.
Yeah, now we have DocuSign and we are in fact evaluating that, DocuSign, and just getting some opinions whether we can use it. Now, the point is which another thing is that recently what has happened, in Singapore. In Singapore, in fact, perhaps one of the first kind of judgment has been delivered over a dispute on cryptocurrency. And in this case, what has happened, that one of the exchange traders, they placed certain orders for buying Bitcoin versus Ethereum, and some system glitch has happened. And because of that, the orders were got reversed, and there's a huge damages for which the plaintiff have called for. And the Singapore court, the trial court, actually looked into this, and just I think last week only they have delivered a judgment holding the the market maker, the market players liable for damages only simply by relying on the rule of the law of damages that is applied. So there's no contract, there's no law as such which is governing cryptocurrency. There's no such law which is in fact looking into aspects of what kind of rules regulation will apply in a cryptocurrency contracts and Bitcoin have. But just looking at the basic concepts of how the law of damages work, the law of contract works, and it's they have awarded damages in favor of the plaintiff, and they are, of course the issue is that how you quantify the damages, because the contract was in Bitcoins and the value of the Bitcoin changes over a period of time. So they are looking into some of the methods to look at it. So I'm saying that even these technologies related contracts which are coming up, disputes are coming up, the fundamental of law will never change. It will remain simple. Whatever we do in offline, the same concept will actually be used in the online as well. Only the mode changes, some of the features, methodologies will all change. And so we should be looking at some of the how they are having as an enabler, and it's a progressive way where the world is moving. And as the business is moving, of course, the law will also has to catch up because this is the reality which is there. For example, the internet, now we just celebrating 40 years of internet, 30 years of internet, evolving as and now it has evolved. So there are laws which covers cyber security, cyber laws, and all kinds of online content management, and everything is there. So law is all periods are evolving. And in fact, recently I was reading that European Union, they have just passed one draft code of conduct on the overall process of how the artificial intelligence should work, on the ethical issues which are involved. And there is a thought which is going on. Recently I met a couple of people, and they were saying there's a couple of thoughts which is going on to draft something model law on that, like we have unsettled model law on e-commerce, unsettled model law on arbitration. Similarly, model law is also now in the anvil. They are in discussion to cover some of these areas, so that these things should apply and get adopted universally across all the countries. Because as Jyoti mentioned, blockchain is also one of the examples where multiple parties, multiple jurisdiction, how do you deal with that? So there is a thought already going on to create some kind of model code of conduct, model policy where people can and countries can adopt and facilitate, and as an enabler while as the economy goes further, as the business goes further.
All right. So I think we have just time for a quick last question. So this is more of a progressive question. What is the future of law and your vision for harnessing the power of technology in law? Anubhav, if you could share your thoughts on this.
At least my world looks full of technology, that I can assure you. But in terms of the future, I see some defined and some non-defined trends, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. As in the previous question, I think what we have seen is, yes, there is disruption in technology, but the application of technology usually takes a cycle of 5 to 8 years to adopt, right? And say, for example, we talked about insurance, right? E-insurance is there in the horizon for the last 5 years, right? But it still is not picked up, right? I think it's more to do with the consumer confidence. It is more to do with other factors in terms of the health condition. So maybe another 5 years, when we have reached that kind of maturity, then the percolation or penetration of technology will happen, right? And law is is not alienated to this phenomena. I think what I see is there are applications, there are solutions, and there are also technology enablements that are there with us. Now, how much of that is going to get adopted? What is going to change? What is going to be in the mainstream? Why not think of a world where the whole present Contract Act itself changes? The fundamentals will remain same, but the whole principles change, and the contract law right now probably is not written in the way where they could envisage this kind of
Tech
a
revolution.
scenario, right? And it may be there that countries are proactive now to adopt their laws, pass new legislation, and a very classic example of this is driverless cars, right? The connected mobility environment. Now, imagine a world where of a connected car, I don't think, or robots getting robotic rights, right? And these are things which are there in the horizon, they are in the discussion. But I don't think our laws have been written keeping those things in mind, right? They're not even suitable, and we are trying to kind of apply the traditional principles of law to this new environment, which is causing aberration and that lag of adoption. So, therefore, my take on this is wait and watch, keep it open, adopt whatever is possible, and then get rid of what is not possible, right? And it will evolve over time, right? But whatever it is, it should have three things. It should improve our efficiency, make our lives easier, and improve our businesses both in terms of speed and efficiency. I think if they meet these three criteria as a general counsel, I'll be more open to adopting that.
So I'll start with some very basic thing. So talking about Indian labor laws. So you have to maintain all your registers in physical format. So under the labor law, if you have to maintain in electronic form, there is a provision, but you have to write to the concerned department in the ministry, take a special approval for maintaining of electronic requirements, and take a special approval from your mantralaya, which is itself those who have dealt with, I think you have, looks like it's a nightmare. This is one part of how the traditional law is changing and the difficulties. And now we have one side, when we are talking about IoTs, wearable devices, we have a smart TV and all those things which, often directly connects with the entire world. And there are the entire issue of data privacy which is coming up, how the consumers are looking, what are you allowing, what is your consent process, whether it is an informed consent or you have explicit consent. Even it was explicit consent, whether you have explained everything, the rights are well aware. And then the third one is an right to forget. And if I don't want to use, I want to get out of the internet, then the company should be in a position to remove up my data. So we have various, if you look at from as basic as maintaining records, where you need to still go to the ministry and take an approval, and then you have an entire other aspects of consumer privacy and all those. So I think with these two extreme, we'll be working on some couple of years, and before we touch at the next level and the whatever you can point 4.0, 5.0. But the entire area of consumer looking at ease and business looking in ease of doing business, and consumer looking more vocal about their rights in terms of data anonymization, the way they are being tracked, the data analytics part which is common, customization, preferences, the privacy law. I think these two I consider at something which will be shaping the next next 5 to 10 years of before it takes another leap.
So very quickly, I think what's going to happen here, of course, the repetitive tasks and processes are going to be automated now. So we are not going to, there's going to be a chunk of lawyers, junior lawyers who are going to have to do other things. And there is lots happening. There's lots of things to do. Law graduates are not necessarily pursuing in-house counsel roles or law firm roles anymore. They are looking at joining these 2,000 startups that have come up in the last 12 years with tons of funding, who are just providing techno-legal services. So that's a completely new field that has opened up, and it's quite impressive that people are passing out from Premium Law Institute. They're not even thinking about pursuing law because they see a lot of value that they can add to being the brain behind artificial intelligence, because unless and until the machine is no good unless and until you provide what it is. So that's going to be the future.
A joke comes to mind that is rather relevant to this. The definition of an economist, according to certain cynics, is someone who, when he discovers that something works in practice, tries to work out whether it also works in theory. This also applies in the field of law. Lawyers have to be very much aware, people especially who are drafting law, drafting regulations and rules, they've got to understand what really works and not make assumptions about technology that turn out to be too easily falsified by experience. They've got to be very careful about what works in the real world of technology. And the real world of technology is going to become much, much more complex and much more difficult. We've now got something called quantum computing. Quantum computing depends actually on when a subelectronic particle is there and not there at the same time. Have you thought about the evidentiary issues involved in this? I mean, I don't know, I'm just speculating. But if something is there and not there at the same time, it's like a ghost. So how do you deal with this in legal terms? How do you deal with the behavior of the systems that depend on quantum physics? I don't see any solution in the field of law, and maybe we're going to have to say there is no solution here. The other thing, since you mentioned IoT, I've been working on this for the last year or so, and I've discovered something very, very disturbing. There is no global security standard for IoT. And this has major legal implications for everything, including terms and conditions, contracts, liability, you name it. And the legal industry actually has to put a little bit of pressure on the IoT technology providers or developers, but it's also got to understand that for the time being, you've got legal limbo, which is an extremely uncomfortable situation. And we've got to deal with the problem of these standards in order for this legal limbo to be resolved.
Sure, absolutely brilliant thoughts shared by the panelists on the future of technology and its application in law. So I think we're just too short of time. I will thank the panelists for their wisdom shared with us. So thank you everybody on this.